So today we're going to do it a little bit differently. We have Howard Greenberg, who's actually in Berlin and who's recovering, who had been sick, and like a trooper came in and made this whole thing happen. So I'm really thankful for that. Um, and let me just give you a tiny little background on Howard. Howard, for over 40 years, has built a dynamic collection of showcasing the history of photography, from pictorialism and modernism to contemporary commercial and fashion imagery. His holdings include Henry Carter Bosson, Bruce Davison, Gordon Parks, Edward Stuyton, Paul Strand, Joel Meyerowitz, and Vivian Maier. And it's not an overstatement to say, this gallery is probably one of the most important galleries we have in the world. So I'm really thrilled to have Howard, and we're going to be discussing Vivian Maier and the whole journey that has brought her to attention to all of us. So with that, I give you Howard Greenberg. Howard, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. You're welcome. So, okay,
Yeah, off we
showtime.
go, Howard. So how did it come? How did this collection of work come to you? And while Howard was talking, I can I have one of the books here, Howard. This one, right?
Yeah.
Right. And we'll flash through some pages as you go along.
Okie doke. So my story with Vivian Maier starts back to the time when just after John Maloof bought most of her material at a storage locker auction, which by now is pretty famous that he did it that way. Um, and in the beginning, he had all this material. And I should preface it by saying John, at that point, was in his 20s and uh, kind of an antique picker.
Okay.
No better way to describe him, but a
Well,
very smart young
really.
man and very with very good intuitions. And he felt that after just looking a little bit at what was there, that there was enough of old Chicago in the negatives that he could put together a brochure that might help him advertise his two or three small family properties that they had in
Right.
Chicago. And whatever he had to spend, he probably could get back by selling the cameras on eBay. So that was John's mindset in the very beginning. Um, he went ahead and he spent some money, it wasn't a huge amount, and bought quite a bit of the material. He began to, because he's a curious guy, he started to scan the negatives and look at them and realized that, this person was a pretty good photographer. So he started showing them to people. That culminated within, I think, a few months in an exhibition at the Chicago Historical Society.
And what
Now,
year is this, Howard?
it's a good question. I think it's around 2010. I might be
Okay.
off by a year or so, but um, and I became aware of Vivian Maya when I suddenly, I won't say my email box was flooded, but a good number of people wrote to me, and it's interesting because these were not photography world people; these were old friends mostly who said, "Hey, have you heard of this Vivian Maier? I just saw this thing on TV about her. It's really interesting stuff, da, da, da." And I had a link to what was a news feature on, I think it was CBS in Chicago on her. I think it was a 10-minute feature when John mounted a show of the work, first show at the Chicago Historical Society.
So Howard, at this point, are you skeptical? Like, all right, so my friend saw some photographs. I mean, like, what was the
Yeah,
thinking on your end, right? I mean, because I'm
yeah,
sure that happens to you all the
I,
time.
I was totally skeptical. Not so much about the work. I was open to the because on this newscast they showed work. Work looked perfectly fine. Wasn't setting the world on fire, but it was good.
Right.
Um, that wasn't the issue. I mean, I come into one way or another, or I'm notified one way or another about a lot of archives that are often very interesting, different kinds of archives going back to the 19th century, but there's no original prints.
Mm.
And in order to do something with it, one would have to create new prints, usually digital, and market it. And that's never been my interest as per se. Um, and I thought this was another one of those situations, so I really didn't pursue it at all. And then uh, I was contacted by a man named Jeff Goldstein who had bought uh, the other large share of the negatives and stuff. When I say large share, estimate maybe 10, possibly 15% of it, which, in retrospect, turns out to be thousands of negatives. And Jeff was kind of aggressive about marketing it. He had a printer, a silver printer, and they quickly made prints. He started running around the country trying to sign up galleries to sell it. He did that book, the first book that you're holding up. That was Jeff Goldstein's book. Uh, Came out of the box really quickly, and uh, was off and running. I actually saw a show that he set up at Mass Mocha. I happened to be up there by accident, so this was the first time I saw prints of it. And, it was interesting, but again, it wasn't for me because there were no vintage prints. And most of you might know I'm primarily a quote vintage print dealer. At least I was back then. And so push comes to shove, and one day I get a call from a man who had been the director of the Milwaukee Art Museum, Russell Bowman, and he left the museum and opened up a painting gallery in Chicago. And we were friends, and he called me and said, "Did you hear about this Vivian Maier?" And I said, "Sure, sure, I heard about it, but I'm really not interested. There's no vintage prints." And he said to me, "Ah, but there are." I said, "What?" Because there was this wellspring,
Yeah.
already about Vivian Maier going up. So when I heard that, I was quite interested. And I would say 3 days later, I was on a plane to Chicago to meet with John Maloof
All right.
because now I was
So
interested.
yeah. So when you just had seen the images, they were intriguing enough, but it was when you saw that they had vintage prints, that's when it really, it sparked for you.
That's right.
Okay.
And so I went to see John. And I should mention, John had actually sent me, someone suggested a package of information and some, small scan prints and stuff, had sent it to the gallery just a couple of months previous. And I never opened it. I told my assistant just to send it back with a nice note. Okay. So I get to John and we go up to his attic in his house and he sits me down on his computer, nice big screen. He had scanned at that point about 250 negatives. And in the meantime, of course, he's telling me the story of what's happened so far, what he's discovered so far, and the mystery of it all so far. And I'm finding it very intriguing. And the intriguing part of course, was the fact that this woman made all these photographs, took all these photographs, developed the negatives, and essentially never showed them to anyone. I had a really hard time wrapping my head around that. Um,
But that piece, did that add value, or the mystique of that?
oh yeah,
Where did
the,
that play for you? Because
the
now it's an
mistake.
interesting
Well,
story, right?
I studied psychology in college. I didn't study photography. That happened after college.
Okay.
So I'm always fascinated by what goes on in people's minds. And as a photographer, I was equally fascinated by any person who would obsessively photograph their entire life and simply choose not to share it with anybody. In fact, hide it. That's very weird, and it's
Yeah.
very unusual. And yeah, I was fascinated with the idea. So by the end of the day, what happened was I looked at uh, more and more of the pictures that John had scanned, and he has very good taste. He knows what a good photograph looks like. So the pictures on the whole were good ones. And I'm increasingly getting interested in this woman when he tells me she would process film under a fictitious name, and her insistence on with the people she worked for as nannies, not to go into her room in the attic. It was always in the attic, locked up. This kind of weird shit. So
So wait, how do we know that? How do we know that that's how that happened, Howard? That she was hiding these, these her
Well, I
prints
think
or whatever she had.
if my memory serves me right, in chronologically, John had already spoken to one or two
Uh,
of the people who employed her,
okay.
so he had some insight into it already at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, at the end of the day, I looked at the quote vintage prints, and for the most part, except for a few, they weren't really vintage. They were prints that she made, I assessed that she made rather quickly, somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s. And I knew that because they were all on this one particular paper, a very distinctive paper that I myself used, experimented with when I was a young photographer. It was Kodak Opal G. It was like a portrait paper, very thick, matte finish paper, almost no contrast. And
Mm,
and these prints had been sitting. You could tell she printed them once, dried them, and put them in a box because they all had the same curl. That
mm.
you just knew what happened, right? So they, by and large, were not very good. These, but by the end of the day, I was so hooked on,
The
yeah, the
story.
story, that the prints were really pretty damn good. Again, not to set the world on fire. I certainly work with photographers who I would have considered better, but they were good. And in combination with this mystique, I thought to myself, well, my colleague's going to fry me. The museums are going to hate it because of posthumous prints, but I'm going to jump in and do this thing because I'm really fascinating. And that's exactly how it started for me. And John was great from the get-go to work with. He was open, he was interested, he's very intelligent. He was very happy to work with me, very happy to listen to my ideas about, how to market it, so to speak, because if I was going to show it, we had to sell it. And if I was going to sell it, I had to figure out what was the best way to do that. And so on. And that was it. That was the beginning.
Right. So the marketing piece that clicks in while you're looking at these images, like how would we do this? Because it's a fascinating story. So like how does it work? Like even from the gallery end, or we've got great images and we've got a terrific story. How does that now flush out for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm going to do this, I have to have one size, one small edition. All these issues had already become big in the gallery world,
Right.
photography. And I'm going to do this in a very controlled way, and see what happens. So I decided to do editions of 15 in one size, and that would be it. And yeah, and I recommended the printer who we still use to this day, Steve Rifkin.
And,
And
and are you thinking legal yet? I mean, like who owns them and any of that? Does that get into your thinking?
um, not really, not at first.
Okay.
You know, basically because I'm pretty naive, and I probably should have investigated. I mean, looking back, I'm sure we had conversations about ownership, and I don't remember when, but early on, John assured me that he was actually hiring a genealogist, which he did, to research it, to see where the reproduction rights lie, and if there was family. And in the beginning, he learned a little bit. He learned she had a brother who died in a mental institution. He learned there were no next of kin whatsoever. And then this would have happened, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, if I have that right, after John and I met. But then he went to France, to the village where she came from, where she was born, and met people and did research there. And his mission was to find out if there were any relatives.
Right.
You know,
And
John,
so,
John, I have to tell you, a lot of people, because they read about the court situation and it's been so controversial, but I could tell you that John was fastidious in trying to find out who
mm,
really had the rights to these pictures. You
right,
know, we would go in and we figured, if somebody came out of the woodwork or we found out this and that,
right,
okay, there was money set aside,
right,
because we didn't want to get, caught holding a bag in case that
right.
happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, anyway, to continue on that line of thinking, it became very controversial, who owns these, blah, blah.
Yeah,
And once the Cook County public administrator got wind of all this stuff and that there was money being made
right.
and that this is something they should look into, he hired a law firm
Mm.
and they contacted John and started giving him a very hard time about the
So
whole
now
thing.
at this point, is the wind coming out of your sails a little bit?
Not
As,
at all.
not at
Not at
all.
all. Not at all, because I knew that John was in the right.
Mm,
We weren't, he/we were not doing anything unethical, immoral, illegal. We were bringing this work out into the world that I came to believe should be seen. It
right,
was interesting enough and important enough, blah blah, that it should be seen. I never backed off of that belief, from day
right,
one. And John, from as I say, a legal, moral, ethical point of view, I didn't feel like he was doing anything. and
right.
and John's a very upfront guy. He doesn't hide anything, even though a lot of people were accusing him
Yeah,
of commercializing, of cashing in, of all this stuff.
right.
And so again, I can't say how long after we started working together, but it's probably 3 or 4 years, maybe less, um, that I kind of pushed for a meeting with the public administrator of Cook County, bring in the genealogist, bring in our copyright lawyer. I have a wonderful copyright lawyer in New York. Many of you may know her, Nancy Wolf.
Mm.
And they brought in their legal team. They brought in a guy from the state legislature. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So wait, so Howard, so like you're a collector, right? You own a
Yeah,
gallery, you do, and now you're finding yourself, sitting in a boardroom with lawyers and the
right.
city council. I mean, is that a completely new category for you, or is this is something that periodically it happens?
Well, periodically I've met with lawyers, maybe
Right.
not for
Okay.
the same reason,
Yes. Okay.
but I wasn't uncomfortable at all. I was actually quite happy to talk to these people face to face because they were making a lot of representations, a lot of threats, and this and that. And I didn't feel they knew what they were talking about. So
Right.
I said, John, you got to put together a presentation and explain to these people what you're doing, what this is all about. And he did. And it was an excellent one. And they admitted they had no clue whatsoever what John was doing. And in fact, by the end of the meeting, and I should say this was reputedly the third or fourth snowiest day in Chicago's history in
Of course.
February, um, by the end of that meeting, they realized that they were both on the same side. Their job legally, this law firm and Cook County, was to, uh, I don't know how to put it, ensure the legacy of Vivian Maier until a proper heir is discovered. I mean, that's basically was their role in the beginning.
Right.
Um, and thank you for showing these pictures because obviously I didn't prepare a PowerPoint, and these will
Oh,
give you a
it's
really
fine.
good idea of how good Vivian Maier was. So anyway, that culminated in a contract between the estate, the appointed estate
Right.
from Cook County, and John. And it was a tough contract. They were not. They just don't know what goes on in the photography world, and they were asking for all kinds of out of line percentages of money. But we finally honed it down and made a deal, and John became legally permitted to sell her work. That's kind of the way it went. And I'm happy to tell that story up front because a lot of people really don't understand. At the same time, I should say that the other guy who had gone into business, um, uh, they've spent the last several years running after him. He didn't, how should I say, he didn't want to work with these people at all. So they spent a lot of time and effort trying to track him down and sue him. He left Chicago and stuff like that. That's still unresolved, frankly.
Right. So that's somebody else who has some film as
Yeah,
well.
the other guy who bought, as I say, about 10 to 15% of the negatives and
Okay.
some of the prints that were there. Yeah.
Right. Beautiful. Okay.
So
So,
that's that part of the story.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the marketing piece from your end in
Hmm.
like how do we put this together? How do we gain momentum? And that's one thing. But there's other question that burns in me. Like when somebody is so now you have all these negatives. Who gets to be the determining factor on how we print them?
Hmm. Hmm.
Darker, more contrast, all those
Sure,
creative
sure,
pieces. My God.
sure. That's
And
that.
is that done by committee? Like,
No, it's a very good question because posthumous printing is a dicey issue to begin
mm,
with in the world of art photography, and galleries and museums and so on. Um, I have always felt that posthumous printing is justified in very, very specific cases. And primarily, those cases are when there's no other way to put work out in the world that I believe, and this is my judgment,
right,
is extremely important for the world to see. And that goes back to a photographer named Martin Munkachi. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of Munkachi, but he truly was one of the world's most, not just greatest, but most successful and most influential, significant photographer first half of the 20th century.
okay,
And I worked with his daughter. She happened to live in Woodstock, where I did back in the early 80s. And this was like lost work. And she had vintage prints, but very few. And I felt that it was important for the world at large to know Moncachi's work better because he wasn't totally forgotten, but almost. So
but
I, mm,
that's just an interesting level to get to that you feel that important, you feel that committed to this work.
in that case, yes. So I did an edition. Even back then in the 80s, I felt they had to be limited if I was going to say they were worth anything.
Right,
And of course, the edition was 40, which was a small edition back in the early 80s, right? And anyway, that's an example of
right,
it. I could give you one other example because I don't get involved in posthumous printing also often. But the other example is Saul Leiter, much more recent.
right,
And with Saul, he lived long enough that we built up a wonderful inventory, and I had no design at all to ever make posthumous prints, but I also had no idea that he would be so successful and we would sell so many prints. And I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or so, Margaret Erb, who runs Saul's Foundation, who worked for me for 20 years, um, was getting nervous. The signed prints were really running low. And she said to me that they have a box in all of Saul's stuff. There was a box of slides, just slides thrown into this box, and the box was marked to be printed. So I said, aha, that's really interesting. So Saul selected those. They had never been printed before. It's not like we ran out of Through Boards, one of his greatest hits, so we're going to make a lot more prints so we could sell that famous picture. These were all never printed, and they were all selected by Soul. So in that case, I felt
Wow.
justified to make posthumous prints. And okay, Vivian Maier. Well, there was no other way
Right.
to bring this work to the world. There was simply was no other way. The lifetime prints, we'll call them lifetime prints, weren't good enough. And I understood why. I mean, she almost never had use of a darkroom. We learned quickly that she never even made a contact sheet. She'd put the negative in, she'd make a print, she'd go on to the next thing. And she, even though she had photography in her background, her mother's very close friend was a professional portrait photographer. Um, she obviously wasn't spending time making the fine print in the darkroom. So what's left to show her as a photographer? Okay,
And all
your
this,
question, how did we decide what pictures?
but just one piece, like the discovery of all this has got to be exhilarating, right? As you're learning, this piece and that piece, and she didn't have a dark room, and she couldn't do more, and like you're really getting into who she is, right?
That's
And
right.
life. I mean, how
Yeah,
fascinating is that for you, right?
well, it is fascinating, and it's increased exponentially when you start looking at the self-portraits in terms of who she is. Because and I'll go off on that tangent afterwards, but I truly believe and did from day one believe that the self-portraits are by far the most interesting and perhaps most significant aspect of her work. And because they combine both the psychological aspect, which you can never ever get tired of trying to figure out, and her visual exploration. It's in the self-portraits where she has herself as a model and she could go to town making interesting photographs. And she did. So you have both of these elements of her work in the self-portraiture. So yeah, anyway, I've always felt that was significant. In fact, uh, I'll take it one step further. When John and I first started working together, he had a contract with Powerhouse to do two books. And the first one, I'm sorry, was not by the other guy. The first one was John's first book with Powerhouse, which I had nothing to do with. But I said, John, to satisfy a contract, and the second book, I think we should do a book of the self-portraits.
Okay,
Great. So we did this book, which
right.
I guess a lot of you have seen. It's a small book, and it was done way back when, but I felt it was important to put it out quickly to gain some respect and some, more academic interest in her work, and that's what we did.
So that's a
Uh,
strategic move.
yeah, yeah. So going back, oh, selecting images. Going back to your question. Um, Yeah, in the beginning, John selected them. He would show us. He'd send me 50 or whatever pictures. What do you think of these? And I might say, well, I like these, 25 or 30, but I don't like these. Okay, let's print those 25. That's pretty much the way it went. Don't you love the light dividing a face in half in that picture? It's great.
Yeah.
And so right from the get-go in my work with John, it was pretty much a collaboration of what we should print. John, we always had the last word. And I say we, I mean the gallery always had the last word. John would pull make prints of pictures that or yeah, he'd make prints of pictures that he liked and thought might work for us, and we would edit from there.
And is that a new collaboration for you to work with someone in that way, or is that something that is somewhat standard in the gallery space?
Well, it's standard from the point of view that I've collaborated with different photographers different times over exhibition selection, sometimes book selection. It really it depends.
Right. Okay.
So it wasn't so unusual
Right.
for me to do something like that. It was I enjoyed doing it because John, as I said, was very intuitively visual of he's visually intelligent intuitively. Okay.
Right.
So he always sent me pretty good pictures, you know.
So when that box comes, right? It comes to the gallery. I mean, what is the feeling that you had opening this up? I mean, are you like a child, and it's I'm getting a present? I mean, like what did that feel? I mean, because you're respecting John through this whole process, and now
Yeah,
new prints are coming.
yeah,
That's got to
yeah.
be exciting.
Well, it is exciting, and it's exciting. It's exciting for the reason that I'm always surprised at the fact that there are more good pictures,
Right.
more good pictures that I am not sheepish about having printed and selling. You
Right.
know, sometimes I call Vivian Maier the well that never runs dry.
Because it's that
And
many.
and in fact, she really had an incredibly high percentage of good pictures. Let me say, a lot of her pictures with the kids, I find a little sappy and sentimental, even though some people like them and they continue, some of them continue to sell. It's not my cup of tea. Kid pictures never was.
Okay.
But but over the years, in looking at more and more and more and working with more, um, I really come to see her as a not just an excellent photographer, but a unique, um, but a photographer who is unique in her way, like other great photographers. At first, it's hard to see her mark, her personality, her way of thinking in the photographs. I think it's that because she's a street photographer. So they don't look all that different than other street photographers in many ways. But over time, seeing lots of pictures, she really does emerge for me and I think others as a photographer to reckon with, maybe worthy of this reputation that she's earned, and all
And
that.
and
Yeah.
and how do you fight your own bias? I don't really like photographs so much of the kids. Like how do you come to grips with
I
wait,
don't I don't fight it. I consult with my staff.
okay. So
No, I'm
that
serious.
no,
It's
I'm
always
sure because there's got to be a way, right? I mean to
it's
move
it's
along.
never just my decision.
Right.
I always ask the staff's opinion because I mean I get things wrong all the time,
Right.
and
Okay.
sometimes they do, and sometimes I insist on this and I say no to that. But no, it's a collaboration all the way around. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great. All right. So now you have these different bodies of work. John keeps on sending you images, and where do we go from there? As we're discovering more and more.
Well, the arc, if you will, of what's happened with this work from the beginning, in
Right.
my experience, to present, let's say, you have to look at the film. John quickly had an ambition to do a documentary film. He
Okay.
felt that her story, all of this was really worthwhile. And somehow he met a man living in Hollywood. He happened to be the nephew of Gene Siskel, if you remember Ebert and
Yeah.
Siskel, the
Yeah.
film reviewers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so this guy grew up in LA, he was a film person. And together they raised some money. One of the investors was Jeff Garlin from Larry David Show.
Right.
And uh, and they went and they created this film, the two of them.
Searching
Uh,
for
it
Vivian.
called Finding Vivian Maier,
Right. Right.
and you probably know it was nominated for an Academy Award. It was a pretty
Right.
good film,
Yeah.
and that really, well, before that film, we were selling a lot of pictures all over the world.
Really.
Um, and I could tell you it was from no brilliance on my part. It happened almost literally by itself. You
Really.
know, people couldn't get enough of it. Galleries wanted to show it. Um, a colleague of mine, Anne Warren, sent out two traveling shows all over Europe and in Asia. It just spread like wildfire,
Wow.
and people were buying the
And are you
work like
surprised that
crazy.
were you surprised that that was starting, that was happening?
I was
Or,
shocked at how fast it happened,
yeah.
and I was shocked at uh, um, how how voluminous it became. I mean, I really was. I
Yeah.
never expected that to happen for day one. It was a gambit, if you will, on my part. I didn't
Right.
know what would happen. I knew how
And
I felt,
yeah.
and yeah.
And so, from a career standpoint, is there something else that you could match that with? To say, I really never had a reaction like this, only with this photographer or that photographer. Is there any comparative thing you
No
can do?
comparison.
No comparison.
No comparison. No
Wow.
comparison. The only one who I could try and compare it to might be Saul Leiter,
Mm,
because Saul was so popular, still is, and we sold a lot of Saul's prints. And I worked, but in Saul's case, I worked for years, trying to build it up, trying to get him a book, a first book, trying to get the world to really see. I mean, we did probably three, maybe four shows before Saul's work caught on. But once it did, it sold really well, and people around the world, particularly in Europe and France, embraced the work, and it was great. But nothing
really?
at all to compare to the Vivian Maier phenomenon. I call it a phenomenon.
Yeah.
No, I've never had anything like this happen to me. No.
Is there a way to explain that? Is it the mystique that she's gone and it was discovered? I mean, because the images are of course stunning. Like, what was the other spice to this that got, or what
Yeah,
do you believe the
that's
other
good.
spice
No,
was?
no, that's a good question. I've asked myself that many times. Well, on one hand, there's what we know, which is the mystique. Oh, this woman's work was discovered in a storage locker. She was a nanny. Nobody knew the work existed. People love the thrill of discovery. Everybody does, right?
Yep.
And that's certainly an element. Um, but the pictures, I mean, that's not enough for somebody to plunk down. I think 1,800 was the starting price.
Wow.
It's not enough for somebody to spend real money. What was enough though was when you took that story and then you combined it with these pictures that people could really relate to. There's something about her photographs where the average person, if you will, I'm not talking about the sophisticated photo intelligentsia person, but the average person out there, they see something in her work that they really relate to. They
Yeah.
really, enjoy. It looks excellent. She was seeing things that they see but never noticed, that kind of
Right.
thing. And I think a lot of people have easily been able to relate
Mm.
to themselves personally and her work. I've talked to people about it, and I pretty much get that response one way or
Yeah.
another. I also find it fascinating that so many of the prints that we've sold have gone to people who are not photography collectors and not museums.
Wow.
You
And
know,
how do you find that out, Howard? I mean,
well, the museums predictably have
right.
turned their nose up on the work. And I say predictably, large part because it's posthumous printing, and in large part because they're not really looking into the work and they're not seeing anything to burn, their bushes down. And these days, museum curators have other fish to fry, much more interested in either very, very high ticket, history of photography people or contemporary work. So I haven't been that surprised about the museums. Not all of them. A few museums have bought the work. Some of the
Right.
smaller museums have bought it. Um, but uh, yeah, I don't. I, I mean, I've sold some of a lifetime work, some of the better stuff, to a couple of my collectors, people who collect vintage photography.
Mhm.
Um, but very few. I've had a lot of collectors say, yeah, I like it, but I don't know if I want to get involved. A lot of them was spooked by the legal issues that came up, even though that had been settled 100%.
So when you say
So, yeah.
the legal issues, like if I buy it and there's still a legal issue, it brings the value down?
No, I don't think it so much brings the value down. Maybe the pictures weren't supposed to be sold.
Ah,
I
okay.
I had one or two, collectors who were afraid of that.
Mm,
Not very afraid of it, but enough so that, they're not vintage prints, they're this, I'll pass.
okay.
But there've been a good few thousand people around the world who've bought the work.
Really? Thousand?
Yeah,
Wow.
a few
Few that.
thousand.
Few that. Wow. Wow.
And it's shocking to me. I never ever expected it, but I find it convincing to
Mm,
myself
that's got to,
of
yeah.
the power of her work to an average person. That people see something in her work, and a lot of people see it in a lot of different countries.
Right.
And yes, it's a story too, but they see something and they have to have a
Mm.
print.
And I mean, you don't need it, but it's got to be incredibly gratifying to you and to John. Like we found this gem and we did it the right way. And
Yeah,
there is a huge audience for
yeah.
this. So I mean, it's got to make you feel good that you recognized this, got it out in the right way, and
Well,
that's got to, like when you
yeah,
put your head on the pillow, that's got to feel nice.
it does.
Yeah,
It
right.
does.
It's
I
a
mean,
beautiful thing.
I didn't do anything different than I would ordinarily do.
Right.
You know how it is. You don't think in retrospect when you're in the middle of doing things.
Right.
You
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
try and do what's right. I try and do what's right all the way around. I have
Yeah.
to pay attention to the business. I have to pay attention to supporting, the 12 or 15 employees. I have to pay attention to working well with the person who's the source of the pictures, whether it's the
Right.
photographer or the estate or whatever.
Right.
And make the pictures look as good as I can do. And
Right.
also, if I believe in it, be able to sell it, quote, to the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah. And
So it's the same all the time. Yeah.
right. And when the prints are coming, do you give John input? It should be a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more this, less of that. Do you get into that space as far as the actual?
Well, fortunately, the printer, and it's the same printer since day one,
Uh,
um, is a guy I had worked with for many, many years. And I had the feeling that, I mean, I know a lot of great printers, but I had the feeling, because of some other stuff that he had printed, that I thought it was the right paper, the right look, for bringing out her work. I mean, there was no way to know that, but it just,
right.
you go on feel sometimes, and it seemed correct. So we let Steve do the printing, and honestly, I don't think I ever corrected a print.
Is that right?
Yeah, he just kind of nailed it from my point of view right from the beginning. He didn't, I didn't want it to go too contrasty, too
Right.
extreme a print. I felt based on what I had seen that she did, that wouldn't represent the work well. So the style is slightly softer on it's an Ilford matte paper,
Right.
if you know it. And it's a nice kind of, it's not uh, fake warmth. It's not brown, but
Mm,
it's a warm gray.
right.
And if anything, on the low side in contrast. And always felt those prints looked good. And yeah, I've never corrected one of them. So,
Mm. And in this process, does everyone have an equal voice? Because it is such a unique situation in every step of the way, as
uh,
far as as
y-
far as printing, getting it out there, doing books, movies. I mean, is it done by committee, or in this category, you have more sway, they have more sway in another space? How does that work? Because it has to be
sure.
such a
Well,
collaborative effort.
uh, as time's gone on, actually, even from the get-go, pretty much. Whatever projects were in the air, we usually came through me,
Right.
uh,
Okay.
books and other things. And that was fine with John. It's always been fine with John. John's actually, at the end of the day, kind of shy and happy to stay in the background. He doesn't do many panels or anything like that anymore, and so on. But no, I'll give you an example. I got a call one day from a woman who was the chief editor of the imprint for art books with HarperCollins.
Mm.
And she didn't know Vivian Maier from a hole in the wall, except that her husband worked for Steve Rifkin, the printer, and he was printing some of the photographs. So he woke up Elizabeth as to this work, and she went gaga, and she decided HarperCollins should do a book.
Uh,
Big deal, very big deal.
yeah.
I was really impressed when she contacted me, and that culminated in two great books, probably the best two, well, the two largest anyway. The first one was of her black and white work, and Elizabeth wanted me to put together the book, and so with John's uh, collaboration, I guess you'd say, I hired or I asked Marvin Heiferman to write it. I have enormous regard for Marvin, and I felt that he would really get this work. And he and I pretty much together, although I gave him, I said, Marvin, you select the photographs and sequence them, and then let me see what you did. So, and then we changed things in that way. So we collaborated, but I asked Marvin to take the lead, which he did. So I'm very much in that book, but he's more in that book than I am. He wrote a beautiful essay. And then they wanted to do a second book of the color work,
Right.
or they
Yeah.
wanted to do a second book, and we didn't know what to do. Let's put it that way. Now, Vivian Maier happened to leave behind something like 40 or 50,000 chromes. It's true. I had I didn't really know much about that at first. I wasn't thinking color, you know? And
I mean, your comment before, it just keeps on giving the Vivian Maier well,
yeah, yeah,
just
it's true.
so much wonderful.
So we jumped into the slides. That was a much tougher exercise.
Mm,
She took some color early on, but very little. It really picks up kind of in the late 60s.
mm,
It also picks up at a time when she gets a little, I think her mental illness advanced, and I think that she became, in a weird way, very political
mm,
and started taking kind of stranger pictures, pictures of newspapers and magazines that had headlines, that she wanted to photograph, stuff like that. She started doing more shadows, which was fine.
yeah.
And anyway, long story short was in looking through all those slides, I found it very difficult
Mm,
to select the best ones to make a good book out of.
right.
But we did, and it wasn't just me. Again, collaborating. Not really John. John never really dug into those slides and was involved in the selection. But we did it, and then I worked. I worked tirelessly with uh, our book designer, Greg Wakabayashi, who has done a number of books for me, design and all our invitations for years and stuff. Greg is a hero, the photographer hero's son,
Wow.
whatever. Greg's also a great designer, particularly for books. So Greg and I worked and try to flush it out. I had color Xeroxes all over the floor and back and
But
forth. You know
how,
how books come together, you know. And
but
in
how,
the end, yeah,
okay.
yeah, I got
No, no, the question just burns. I mean, this has got to be such a career adrenaline shot for you, right? I mean,
yeah.
right, you're at this point wherever you are, and like all of a sudden this is blown up. I mean, can you just segue for a second of what that was for you, how that felt for you? This, like I'm rejuvenated. I mean, I could imagine, and not that you weren't, but like really rejuvenated by this whole Vivian Maier world you've
Frank,
stepped into.
Frank, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I didn't feel that way.
Really?
I felt really good
Yeah.
because everything we were doing with Vivian Maier was successful. The first book with HarperCollins before sitting on the floor with all the color Xeroxes had already sold 40 or 50,000 copies. How many photography books do you know? We were advanced more money to do that book than I've ever seen for the 20 or 30 other books I've ever done in my life.
Wow.
So I had already had, as I went along, all this incredible success. And
Mm.
I didn't become insensitive to it, but you take it in stride.
Yeah,
Also, you
yeah,
got to
yeah.
remember, as great as it has been for myself personally and for the gallery, um, it's not the only thing we've been doing all these years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get that. Yeah.
I represent a lot of great photographers and a lot of great, estates, and they require lots and lots of attention and all that. So, you take it in
Howard, I can
stride,
be.
but yeah,
I, occasionally, I act like a child, Howard. I'm sorry. No,
it's
because
quite all,
I
it's
could
quite
just
all
feel
right.
it.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, because from the outside looking in, and it just, what a great story. Yeah, I interrupted you.
Well, I agree. It is a great story, and it's like I said before, the only story of its kind that I could ever tell. Yeah,
Right.
the whole thing has been pretty amazing. Um, yeah. Anyway, I was talking about the film and how when that came out, it really piqued interest. I mean, it was shown on planes and stuff, so zillions of people saw it. And a little stupid anecdote. I was at Parry Photo, um, trying to sell pictures, and someone I knew came over to me and said, "Oh, I just saw you on the plane." I said, "How did you just see me on a plane? I didn't see you." He said, "No, no, no. I saw you in the movie of Vivian Maier." It was that kind of thing. I said,
I mean that.
"Okay."
Wow, wow.
So, that piqued everything. And then it didn't really come down very quickly. In terms of print sales, it took several years for it really to fall off,
Right.
um, which surprised me, because I've seen runs of success for photographers, and then they reach a plateau, and then it falls off and stuff like that. But with her, it wasn't falling off so fast. And uh, yeah, and then I should add that a woman I mentioned before, Anne Morin, she owns a company called Dichroma, and they travel exhibitions predominantly in Europe, not in America at all. And we're working together for 20 years now. She's fantastic. She's brilliant in every which way. And right in the beginning, she traveled two Vivian Maier shows, a large one and a small one. And yeah, this second one you just showed reminds me that we've always done these small editions of
Mm.
15 one size. As of about 7 or 8 years ago, we had sold out over 150 different images.
Wow.
I know, it's crazy. It's really crazy. Okay, so Anne is amazing and she's tireless. So she went into another very, very deep dive into the archive and curated a show and wrote a book, which opened in Paris at the Musée du Luxembourg. And the Parisians have always taken Vivian on as one of their own because she's born in France, and you know how the French are. And uh, this show it blew me away. It blew me away. She found pictures I had not seen before. John hadn't shown them to me. She found color snapshots, that Vivian had, processed at the drugstore that I had never seen before that were really good. And she created this beautiful installation. So, so impressive. It's not as good, better than many museum shows I've ever seen. And she did this book, which probably most of you haven't seen. I don't think it's been marketed much in America, But if you should have, this is a little awkward to do, but I'll give you a quick flip.
Mm.
Uh, um, the text, I love this design when the text is on a different paper than the pictures,
Ah,
and it's a great text. But she knows that the work at this point. Some of these pictures you've already seen, but um, some of the color that she included. I mean, she knows Vivian Maier's work better than I do and better than John does. Trust
really?
me, she's looked at everything, and she, as I say, she's a brilliant curator. So when this show went up in Paris, it's only 3, 4 years ago, I think. Um, that created a new wave of interest, at least in Europe,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's traveled to a couple of venues already. Because it's such a eye-opener show, you know. So my point is that it keeps going. Just keeps going. Yeah.
And are there people that are alive that are in the images? Has anyone done any research on that for whatever value?
There are people who are alive who hired her as a nanny. I can tell you that.
Right, yeah, that I
One of
know.
them used to be a client of mine. Um, People alive in the pictures that have come forth and identified
Yeah,
themselves
yeah.
or something like that. I'm sure there are,
Right,
but
a bunch of those little kids,
yeah.
the little
Well,
kids in that alleyway there.
yeah, in the movie, some of those little kids are grown up and talk
Right,
about because they were she was their nanny, and
right,
they do show up in some of those pictures, and they talk about being photographed by her. So
right.
yes, to that
Those
extent,
people.
yes, but otherwise, I'm not aware.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
just wondering. Yeah. Wow, Howard, what a story. What a story. So, how many roles are there still many roles that need to be developed, or like where is that piece
There were a lot, like Gary Winogrand, you might say, there were quite a few roles
that are
um,
still
to be developed. And honestly, I don't know if John's developed them yet.
okay?
We
Yeah,
haven't talked about that in a long time. I'm guessing that there's still more to be developed.
right. And who knows what's in there, right? I mean, just more and more gems.
Who knows? Uh, yeah, there was a point I wanted to make before. It's a little out of context now, but you know, as I said, she never made a contact print. There are no contact prints in all her stuff. She processed the negatives one way or another, and that was the end of it. Um, we made contact prints,
Okay.
not a lot. You know, I couldn't give you the number, but probably no more than 20 or 30. And I was extremely impressed. This really kicked her up a few notches in my mind as to how good she was because and the contact prints we made were from the 50s, was early part of her work. Um, what I was amazed to see was how confident she was in making her pictures. You know, she's using a Rolly almost all the time. 12 shots, not 22. And and you see in the contacts that we did a number of the pictures that we had printed that became, you know, famous might not be the right word, but sold out quickly.
Right.
And you see that she only made one, sometimes two exposures. It's never a situation where she sees something and she shoots again and she shoots again from this angle or that angle. It's like boom, boom, boom. And then you see on one roll, there's 3 or 4 or even 5 really good pictures, really good pictures that we printed and sold. I was astounded to see the percentage of good pictures that she made. That meant a lot to me. She really knew what she was looking for, and she
I
saw
got
it
it.
and she shot it. Her timing was, in most cases, is impeccable. You know, when it's a real street picture, whatever the gestures are and the body language, all this kind of stuff, it's just right. You know, and the compositions are always just right. And that's when I learned in making these in seeing these contact prints when I really learned that she was how should I say, an excellent photographer. You know,
Right.
she wasn't. your garden variety, very good photographer. She was better than that.
Yeah, and that's got to be an interesting piece to discovery, right? That's a discovering piece, a discovering moment, right? When you're
Hmm.
looking at the contacts and there's only two or three shots of that image, and that one's terrific,
Yeah,
right? You know, like that just feeds into the knowledge that you're learning of her, of who she was.
absolutely. And in terms of my enthusiasm and excitement, that a good example of what gets me
Right.
enthusiastic and excitement.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of the stuff is gravy, but that turns me on.
I
You know,
bet. I bet that's got to be a clarifying moment, right?
yeah.
In all that. So with the other images that haven't been developed, does that like is there like a loose plan? Like we'll do that in 2 years, and then we'll like put another adrenaline shot. Like
No,
what do you do with
no,
that?
no.
Or it just happens when it happens?
Well, at this point, we probably would have stopped for the most part, not officially stopped, but for the most part, trying to find more images to print. There's enough images printed.
Okay.
um, Except that the gallery has one client uh, with, let's say, a big appetite for
Okay.
them, and they're it's not a single collector. It's a company, if you will, that works on behalf of a lot of collectors in Europe.
Okay.
And they've sold quite a bit of work for us rather.
Right.
And their clients have an unending appetite for more. So from time to time, I'll get a call. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Well, hey John, are there any more good
Yeah.
images? Send me a selection, and then we'll print more.
Right.
And then there's also, at the same time, there'll be a couple of galleries that I work with. I've tried to pare down the number of galleries I work with so it doesn't just get out of hand. Um, but when those moments happen, I'll let the other galleries know so that they have access to the newly printed work, while the prices are lower in the beginning of the edition.
Right.
So yeah, so there's reason to print more, but the impetus usually comes from this one client.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
I mean, Howard, I took you it took you for an hour on this conversation. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. But where else do you want to go, or do you feel like we got it? I mean, are there other
um,
nuggets that you'd like to tell us?
well, it's hard to condense 15 years into an hour,
Yeah, I know.
but I feel like I did cover a lot of territory. I guess I'd love to hear from, people listening. Is that
All right.
possible?
Yeah, let's
Because
unmute
people
anyone.
always have good questions that I haven't thought about. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, me too. Um, if anyone has a question, you could either put it in the chat room, raise your hand. You've got Howard Greenberg to answer any questions you might have. Let me just see what else, because I had a lot of questions, but we went through so many. Um, let's see. Okay. So the legal issues that should be shot. And so with let's see. So Sandy's raised the hand. All right, Sandy, go.
Okay, I have two questions. Were all her pictures taken in Chicago?
No, no. Her first let's say serious pictures when she got her rollie and started believing that she could be a professional photographer, which she had ideas of in the beginning. She was in New York. I think she was in New York from 51 to 55 and then moved to Chicago. I'm not sure of the exact dates, but something like that.
Okay, and
Yeah, go, Sandy. I'm sorry.
the other part of the question is, how did you learn about her life? Because you didn't discover anybody that knew her, any relatives, or so
Well, of course,
how do
there
you,
were a lot of people who knew her in Chicago because she worked for them.
The nannies.
okay.
So, and those people went back pretty far. So, yeah, there was information about her. There were people who knew her and stuff. But there's been, well, one particular woman, um, Vivian, oh my, I'm blanking on her name. She'll kill me. But she wrote a book, not long ago. It was after a lot of these other books. And she did extraordinary research into her family, into her world, into everything, and came up with a kind of thesis about who was Vivian Maier and why. Uh, yeah, I mean, and she found, nobody else knew this at first, some I think a couple of girls who were in one of her pictures. Maybe they were teenagers, but they knew her and knew her afterwards, and she interviewed them, and they gave some insight that we didn't have before.
And
Um,
Marks.
it's
And
a
Marks.
very good book if you want to learn about her
What's
life.
can you put it in the chat? What's the name of the book?
And
Yeah, like
Marks. And Marks is the
Ann
person.
Marks. Thank you, thank you.
That's thank Tony for that. Nice job.
Yeah,
Um,
and the name of the book, I'm getting old. I forget all these things. Um,
I forget
but Ann
everything.
Marks, and it's um, it's a book that it was reviewed and everything, and
I'll
I
just look up
think
Ed Marks.
yeah, check it out.
Yeah.
It's not written in any high literary way, it's very basic kind of writing, but it's really fascinating.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for this whole presentation.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Hi, Howard. It's Karen again. Karen
Hi,
Hirsch.
Karen again. I
Hi.
saw you before. Yeah, I was stopping myself from referring you because of Chicago. Referring,
Hey.
I was every time I said Chicago, I was going to say, "Oh, Karen knows about that."
Oh, for sure. I've seen her exhibits at the History Museum, at the Art Institute. It's
hmm
amazing. Well,
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. One is personal. How did you end up in Berlin?
Um, in one word, uh,
No, you could say more than one word.
well, I prefer one word. It's called
Okay.
love. No, I met a woman from Berlin.
Oh,
Uh, yeah,
oh, that's lovely.
9 years ago, and here we are together now.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Well, congratulations on that.
thank you.
My other question is more general. It sounded like people collect and are interested in vintage prints. What about all the photographers who produce work, but they're not printing it, especially with digital today? Uh, if there's no outlet right now for them for exhibitions or whatever, why should they make prints uh, if they're not going anywhere, but
Yeah,
they're in
but that's
their
not true,
archive?
Karen. I think there are many outlets in the photography world right now for work that's being done, and work that's being done is primarily digital. I mean, some photographers are still, especially in black and white, are still making silver prints, but so much of the work, so much of the production of photographs is digital at this point. There's not much resistance to it anymore.
Right, but they have to find the venues who would accept their work. So if they don't have the venues, that
This is an age-old problem.
yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
you're a
That
photographer, why do you think I became
well,
a dealer? I couldn't find a venue for my work, so I started selling the pictures instead.
that
You
that's
know, that's almost true.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
everybody here has that same lament, Karen. Yeah, that you just got to keep on pounding and pounding and pounding. That's the only way. We have a question from Amy. Amy, unmute yourself.
There we go. Hi, hi Howard. I don't know
Hi,
if
Amy.
we met a year ago at the Griffin, but it's nice
Yep.
to see you. Do we know anything about her training or how she learned photography?
No, not specifically. In the beginning, I had the feeling that she must have taken Lisette Modell's class at the New School. Seriously. For me, all the signs were there. But John searched the school records. He really did. He went all the way to find out, and there was no mention of her or maybe one of her aliases taking any classes there. So we had to eliminate that. That said, she had a library. She had photo books. And she was in both New York at the time when MoMA was, Steichen was at MoMA and doing loads of great photography exhibitions, group shows where she could learn. And in Chicago, uh, the curator at the Art Institute, Hugh Edwards, kind of an unsung hero, one of the great early curators, was putting up fantastic shows all the time. So, she had plenty of access to looking at photographs. Um, I mentioned that her mother, uh, her mother's, I don't think it was a relative, it was a very close friend, and she was a professional portrait photographer in New York. And Vivian, I think, spent time learning from her.
Okay.
She didn't come to photography by accident. So she would have gotten some education that way also. But that's about all that we really know.
And it's interesting because she didn't see so much of what she shot.
Well, this is part of the, insanity of Vivian Maier,
Right. I
the
mean
craziness of the story.
I mean just the
She
curiosity alone.
didn't. She didn't. She didn't. I mean, there's 150,000 negatives. I mean, can you imagine? Can you just imagine taking that many pictures, a lot of them with a rollie, okay, 12 at a time, and just not looking afterwards, or hardly. I shouldn't say not. She would, do drugstore prints from time to time with the color work. She would have drugstore prints, or when she had access to a larger or dark room rather, she would make some prints of some negatives. Just and they're very interesting because you can tell that she's only looking at the negative when she decides what to print, because they're always cropped in a way where you could see the obvious graphics in the picture.
Yeah.
She's,
Yeah. Yeah.
she didn't know. She didn't know. She took all these pictures, and for the most part, she did not look at the results.
So do you make the leap that the little that she did see, she had tremendous amount of confidence in what she was doing,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah,
mean that
yeah.
that's
And again, that's part of the incredible mystery for me of who she was. I mean, no feedback. No feedback, right? I mean, we're all photographers out there pretty much, right? When's the last time you shot a roll or 10 rolls out on an assignment or whatever, and you didn't show the pictures to someone right
right.
away to get feedback or say, hey, I like this one. What do you think? She didn't do that. Hard to imagine, right?
Yeah, but yeah, that just adds to the mystique of all of this, right? It's
You
just
know,
amazing.
yeah.
Just really, really amazing. So is there any is there anything left unsaid about her from an investigation standpoint, or we feel like between yourself and John and everyone else involved has really like I mean going back to the archives at the New School or ICP wherever it was, like to try to find did she take a class? Is there any other rock that
I
needs to be lifted?
I don't know. I hardly think so. Ann Marks was tireless,
Right.
obsessive in turning over all those rocks that she could. And by the way, she did it on her own. I mean, nobody asked her to do it, nobody paid her to do it. She just, and this was a many year investigation that she did. I can't imagine at this point finding out anything else,
Mm.
than what we've discovered and what we haven't discovered, you know.
Right.
It's,
Curiosity is an incredible drug, right? I mean, it
yeah,
just
yeah, for sure.
it really is. Um, any other questions? Any
Hello,
other?
Donna.
Oh,
Hello,
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Donna.
hey there. I don't know if can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can, Donna.
Um, some of the things that I've read about Vivian Maier have led me to believe that her father was a very big influence in her personality, in her character development. That he was quite a cold man and harsh,
Hmm.
extremely harsh. And you being um, fascinated and by psychology, um, I'm just wondering, because you are in a very male-dominated world with photography, and even when we were introduced to your photographers, we know that they were all men that were mentioned. There, Vivian was the only female whose name was brought up,
Yeah,
and
but that's
she is
not true, Donna.
completely unshaped. She
That's
was,
not quite true.
but
That's
that's
not
what
quite
we
true at
heard.
all.
That's what was the other female that was mentioned in the introduction. I know you have
Oh,
many
I'm
females
sorry, in the introduction.
in the
Okay, I thought you
introduction.
meant in
Yeah,
all the
so blame me
photographers I
for that.
represent. No,
Yeah,
no, no. Okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's very interesting, because I believe that someone should be looking into that even more, because it seems like she did not want to be criticized by men, be influenced by men. She worked with children to make a living. She was so incredibly private. But in a lot of the newspapers that she collected, and she had stashes of newspapers in this attic room, many of them were to do with violence against women and children
Mhm.
that she was saving. She was looking at. This is what was haunting her. And
You know,
I
can I say
think that what,
something?
yes.
I'm sorry, I think what you're talking about is very true. Um, Nobody's been able to prove it, but a lot of people who have researched her feel pretty strongly that she was abused by her father, that she
Mhm.
suffered some kind of real abuse when she was young, which obviously formed her personality in some way. You know, I don't, I can't say there's not much doubt about that because we don't know, but it sure seems that way.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
seems that it jumps right out at me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I've been studying this for many years. So I respect that she did not want to be told what to do by anybody. And photography is dominated by men. The whole, from
Yeah, but I don't know about that side of
journalism,
it though.
documentary, and many photographers, especially the powerful male photographers, it's like a club. You know, they know what they're doing. They know what works. They look to each other for guidance and but with someone like a sensitive talent like Vivian Maier, she was determined to do it her way, completely her way. I mean, I would like to know who was her role model as a photographer other than her mother. But the family dynamics are fascinating. Uh,
Yeah.
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 But honestly, Don, I don't
Some
have
of
a
these,
clue
and it
who
must have
her
been
role
sort of
model
healing for her,
or models
extremely
would have been.
healing, that
yeah,
she could express herself with the
Mm,
camera.
yeah,
mm,
I guess some of those things fall into the like just we won't know. We could assume and make some, leaps of
mhm,
faith, but
mhm,
yeah, it's a pity that there wasn't a diary. I mean, something, although,
Mm,
the images are her diary, but yeah, like to know definitively will end up always being that mystery,
mhm.
right? On
Yeah,
some level.
that's true.
it
And
was just
again, Anne really, Anne Marks deep dives into uh, finding as many clues as possible to give us answers to those questions, to your question. Um, but again, like you're saying, Frank, there's nothing is definitive. It's all conjecture at the end of the day. It's educated guessing at best. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Okay.
Could you
Nice to
talk
see
a
you, Donna.
little bit about her French relatives who made a claim on the inheritance and what happened?
Well, John, in this village, most people didn't know who she was, didn't remember her, blah, blah. And then he discovered, it's in the film, finally, Vivian Maier. He discovered this one guy, uh, don't ask me his name, and he was, like something cousin 5 times removed, and that distant a relative. And he was the closest relative John could find with all his genealogical work and his own research in the village where she was from. And they made a deal. John purchased reproduction rights from him, gave him several $1,000s,
Mhm.
and the guy said, "Okay, da da da." the guy had no real clue. I mean, he didn't know who she was. He didn't really care. You want it? Fine. Here it is. Um, Subsequently, there's been this this guy, you probably know about him, David Deal. You know that name, Karen?
It sounds familiar.
David Deal is a mischief maker lawyer who decided that he was going to find the closest heir to Vivian Maier, that there was injustice going on and he would do it. And he went to the same village and did this on his own, and discovered that there was another cousin who was somehow one step closer than the guy John had discovered. And when I say one step closer, he was like fourth removed rather than fifth removed, this kind of thing. And he's been trying to make trouble for everybody ever since, and in court.
Right.
And basically, he's not getting anywhere because there's nowhere to go. And the lawyers who represent the estate in Chicago, they find him a bit of a thorn in the side because he's relentless, but he's not able to prove anything worth anything. So it's a dead end as far as that goes. But he's the only one. That's the only road it's gone down.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, yeah. If you go to Vivian Maier's Wikipedia page, there's a mention of Deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the it's called the legal challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's going on already for years, and it's turning into not much of a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the facts will come out. Um, Howard, thank you so much for doing this. This has really been a gem, and all your time, and I know you're not up to 100%, so I really appreciate it. Any, I guess last question, any unexpected, work that she had that was even more powerful? What was the most, powerful work that you saw?
Of hers?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the
Well,
question. Which elements of
I
work
the
do you
most
find the most
powerful work of hers, as I mentioned before, is a self-portraiture,
portrait? Yeah, that's what you love the best. Okay.
without a doubt, for me.
Yeah.
Again, because on one hand, it's a it's the only way that we have some look into who she was, who she might have been. And on
Right.
the other hand, it's a great look at how just a creative a picture maker she could be.
Right.
Working with reflections, of course, because it's self-portrait, but she's really incredibly inventive and an astute image maker off the street, so to speak,
Yeah.
doing it that way. So when you have those two elements in this huge body of self-portrait work, for me, that's the most impressive. That's really, significant stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Um, Howard, thank you so much for doing this. Like I say, I really do appreciate it, from Berlin, coming in and speaking with us. Everyone should know this is going to be rebroadcast on Wednesday at our no on Thursday, sorry, on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. And if Howard's up late, he can come by and say hello. Really late. Really, really late.
Well, I got to watch a little bit of the World Series
Yes, that's right.
because it was on so late. I had
That's
breakfast in the World Series. That was a shocker. Yeah.
Yeah, you thought that was going to be over. And we have our normal projections tomorrow night with Henry Hornstein. So we're back to back this week. Howard, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And, always nice to talk about what I know about and set records straight with Vivian Maier, because a lot of people don't really understand the whole story. So,
Yeah, no, you crossed a lot of T's, so that's great. So
good.
thank you very much.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right, be
Bye,
well,
everybody.
Howard. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Thank you.